Victor Dane had just ripped away the covering cloth when food scattered across the floor at Anna Morales's feet in the Liberty Crown dining room. In front of dozens of raised phones, he called her a thief and fired her. But while trying to bury an act of kindness, Victor did not know that he had just created a trail leading a desperate father to his missing son. Anna stood still, holding the empty basket in both hands. Food containers rolled across the marble floor. The sound of silverware stopped. Then whispers spread throughout the room. Victor pointed toward the floor. "Where is security? She is taking restaurant food outside." Anna knelt, collected each container, and wiped it clean with the edge of the cloth. Her cheeks burned, but her voice remained quiet and clear. "Chef Marisol authorized it. This food was untouched and recorded in the transfer log." "There is no such record." Victor turned toward the guests as though he were performing for them. "I checked. She is using her uniform to steal." Marisol Vega called from the kitchen entrance. "I signed the authorization allowing Anna to take it. Victor, you know that procedure?" Victor immediately raised a hand to silence her. "Return to the kitchen. This matter falls under my authority." Then he turned to security. "Deactivate her access badge immediately." Victor still had time to stop and examine the records, but with cameras watching, he chose to protect his authority. At a table near the window, Jonathan Blake had witnessed everything. The steak before him had been cold for a long time. On his phone was a photograph of a brown-haired teenage boy and the latest message from the police. Day 4. No new leads. For 4 days, Jonathan had called hospitals, checked transportation stations, and used every connection he had. Nothing had brought Eli home. When he saw Anna hiding the remaining containers beneath her apron, Jonathan briefly wondered whether Victor might be right. But she did not eat or sell the food. She held it tightly, as though protecting dinner for someone who was not there. Victor threw an envelope beside her. "Your final wages. Take them and leave this restaurant." Anna stood. She placed the envelope on the nearest table and looked directly at him. "You may take my employee badge, but do not call food meant for children stolen property." Without waiting for security to touch her, she carried the basket outside. Near the restaurant entrance, a young newspaper seller shivered beside a streetlight. Anna removed the only bag of bread that had not been crushed, placed it in his hands, and pulled his scarf higher around his neck. She did not give him her name or look back, but Jonathan had seen her. He stood just as a plastic identification card fell from Anna's coat. Jonathan picked it up from the sidewalk. Beneath her photograph were the words, "Volunteer, St. Matthew Youth Center." His breathing stopped. 1 week before disappearing, Eli had searched for St. Matthew on his computer. Jonathan had assumed it was a random address. Now the name rested in his hand like a direction. "Miss Morales!" Anna had already boarded a bus and did not hear him. The doors closed. Jonathan ran to his car, keeping his eyes on the red lights ahead. 4 days of silence had worn away every trace of pride. He was only a father holding on to the first sign connected to his son. The bus stopped near the train station, where metal shutters covered the closed stores. Anna stepped off, carried the basket through an alley dusted with snow, and disappeared through the side entrance of an old church. A faded sign on the brick wall read, "St. Matthew." Through a basement window, Jonathan watched Anna divide the food into portions and check an allergy list. A young girl was trembling in a wet coat. Anna gave her the chair nearest the heater, then knelt to retie her shoes. No one knew that Anna had just lost her job. She did not tell them. Nearly 20 children and teenagers sat around old tables. Anna filled the final bowl with soup, carried it to the corner, and said, "Lee, eat it while it is still warm." The teenager in the hooded jacket held an old backpack tightly against his chest. He pushed the soup toward a younger child beside him and kept only the bread. When he leaned forward, the backpack opened slightly, revealing the corner of a map marked by hand with the code S17. Then he raised his face. Jonathan stopped breathing. After 4 days of searching through hundreds of blurred security images, he still recognized the small scar beside the boy's left eyebrow and Ruth's eyes in his face. "Eli." Jonathan rushed across the street and pushed open the side door. The hinges screamed, and everyone in the basement turned toward him. Anna immediately stepped between Jonathan and the teenager. A woman wearing a social worker identification badge approached in a calm, controlled manner. "My name is Denise Walker. Please stop where you are. You may not approach him until we verify your identity and confirm that he is safe. I am his father." Jonathan pulled out his phone, but his hand shook so badly that he nearly dropped it. "Eli, it is me. I came to take you home." Eli's face turned pale. He gripped the backpack and stepped backward until he reached the wall. Jonathan started moving toward him, and the commanding voice he used in business returned without thought. "You must come home immediately. I will call Graham and have him handle everything." The moment Eli heard Graham's name, his body jerked as though someone had touched an open wound. He pulled the backpack closed and looked toward the rear exit. Anna did not know that Lee was the son of a millionaire. He had arrived that afternoon using only part of his name, and Denise had already submitted his information to child protection authorities for verification. But Anna recognized the posture of a child who feared losing the right to speak. She lowered her voice as she addressed Jonathan. "If you want him to move toward you, first let him know that you will not drag him away." Jonathan looked at his son hiding behind the table. An entire corporation followed his orders. But the one thing he needed now could not be commanded: Eli's trust. Jonathan stopped. He slowly knelt several steps away and placed his phone on the floor. "I have been searching for you for 4 days." Eli's eyes filled with tears, but his voice no longer sounded like that of a child who had simply run away in anger. "You searched because I am your son, but did you ever search for the reason I had to leave?" Jonathan opened his mouth, then remained silent. Outside the window, snow began covering the Blake Urban Development logo on his vehicle. Eli looked at the logo and tightened his hand around the backpack strap. After several seconds, he pulled open the inner lining and removed a blue flash drive shaped like a lighthouse, tied with an old worn ribbon. He raised it between them. "If you take me home before looking at this, dozens of children will have nowhere to return tomorrow morning." The blue flash drive lay between father and son, like a boundary neither dared to cross. Jonathan reached toward it, but Eli immediately stepped back and hid it inside his palm. "I will open it only if Miss Denise and an independent representative are present." Jonathan wanted to give an order, but Eli's rigid shoulders made him stop. Denise checked Jonathan's identification and informed the police and child protection authorities that the missing teenager had been found. After an initial assessment, she explained that Eli could remain at St. Matthew for the night under lawful supervision. "I'm taking my son home," Jonathan said. You are his father, but we must make sure he is heard while he feels safe, Denise answered. If you force Eli to leave now, his fear will become stronger than the truth. Jonathan turned toward Anna. You knew he was hiding here and never contacted me. Anna remained beside the soup table, her hands cold. I believed Lee might be running from someone who frightened him. I did not force him to speak. You concealed my son. Denise placed a file on the table. It recorded the time Eli arrived, the name Lee, the risk assessment, and the report submitted before Jonathan entered the building. Jonathan read it and became silent. Anna had not hidden Eli. His false name and fear had delayed the identification process. Having money does not give you the right to turn everyone into a suspect, Anna said. Tonight, you treated me exactly as Victor treated me at the restaurant. Inside the counseling room, Eli still held the backpack strap. He explained that after Ruth died, their home had become a place filled with assistants, drivers, and tracking devices. Jonathan always knew where his son was, but never asked how deeply he missed his mother. You called it protection, Eli said. I called it being watched inside a house where no one listened anymore. When the independent representative arrived, Eli connected the flash drive to Denise's computer. The screen displayed internal emails, a clearance map for St. Matthew, a list of families facing displacement, and a contract with Keystone Renewal Partners. The final folder contained an audio file named Ruth, but Eli did not open it yet. Jonathan enlarged the demolition appendix. Beneath project code S17 was his electronic signature. I signed a redevelopment summary, he admitted, but I never saw this appendix. Eli looked directly at him. Your name is on it. Your corporation is on it. Why should I believe you did not know? Jonathan had no answer powerful enough to erase the signature on the screen. He called Graham Cole and placed the call on speaker. Graham, explain the St. Matthew project. There was a brief silence. Then Graham answered calmly. It is an abandoned building inside the redevelopment area. No children live there. The legal department approved the documents. You should focus on bringing Eli home. I will handle the company. Graham had just rejected his first opportunity to tell the truth. Jonathan ended the call and contacted Lena Price, an independent digital forensic specialist. Preserve every server, email, and signature certificate history. Do not notify Graham. Near midnight, Jonathan brought Lena to corporate headquarters while Eli remained with Denise and the independent representative. As the system backup began, Graham arrived with snow still covering his coat. An audit now will create a scandal and send the share price collapsing, Graham warned. You are allowing a child's emotions to destroy the corporation. I am examining whom the corporation may have destroyed, Jonathan answered. And if employees only dare to show me attractive numbers, then I helped create that culture. While Lena traced the data, Marisol called Anna back to Liberty Crown. She opened the cloud backup of the donation log, proving that the food transfer had been authorized. Kitchen security footage also showed Victor signing into the system and deleting one transfer page. Before the restaurant owner and a labor representative, Victor was asked to explain. Instead of restoring Anna's job and apologizing, he pushed a confidentiality agreement toward her. Sign it. You will receive all unpaid wages and 3 additional months of compensation. Anna closed the document. I need my name restored. I do not need money to help you preserve a lie. Jonathan did not use his wealth to rescue Anna. He provided only his witness statement, while Marisol submitted the records to the labor representative. For the first time, he helped without controlling the result. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Lena called everyone back to St. Matthew. Jonathan's electronic signature certificate had been copied from an administrative computer controlled by Graham. The approval email had been sent at 2:13 in the morning while Jonathan was attending Ruth's memorial service and was not using a computer. The registration records for Keystone Renewal Partners led to the law office of Graham's brother-in-law. If the transaction was completed, Graham's concealed benefit would be worth millions of dollars. Jonathan summoned Graham and placed the evidence before him. This was the executive's second opportunity to cooperate. Graham only gave a cold smile. Eli stole confidential data, Anna is exploiting a wealthy teenager, and you are allowing guilt to destroy everything Ruth helped you build. Eli tightened his hand around the backpack strap. Jonathan did not lose his temper. He instructed Lena to document the evidence in its original condition and transfer it into a protected evidence system. After Graham left, Eli opened his mother's audio file. Ruth's voice filled the room, weak but clear. If anyone calls this place an empty property, bring them into the basement during dinner. Eli lowered his head. He had not left home to punish his father. He had come to St. Matthew because it was the final place where he believed his mother's memory remained alive. Jonathan stood before Ruth's photograph beside the art room. I cannot demand that you trust me simply because I am your father. I will have to do something worthy of your trust. Before Eli could answer, Lena discovered a hidden file. The demolition permit would take effect at 6 o'clock in the morning. To stop it, they needed to request an emergency suspension from the city during a public overnight hearing. At the same moment, Denise received the official notice on her phone. Anna looked at the clock. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The sound of heavy engines came from the street. Through the basement window, construction vehicles began stopping outside St. Matthew. Their yellow lights moved across the faces of children who had just awakened. Jonathan held the file bearing his own signature. Only 3 hours remained for him to decide whether to protect the corporation's reputation or stand before the public and admit that his failure of oversight had placed this shelter in front of a bulldozer. At 3:15 in the morning, the construction vehicles were still running outside St. Matthew when Jonathan carried the documents into City Hall. He did not force Eli to walk beside him. Eli chose to sit with Denise and Anna, while Lena sealed the flash drive inside an evidence bag. The hearing room was filled with center employees, parents, children, and reporters. Graham Cole arrived with his attorney and argued that Project S-17 was lawful and that every accusation relied on information stolen by a teenager. Jonathan entered with Eli, but did not pull his son beside him for the cameras. Eli sat between Denise and Anna. When the city clerk called Blake Urban Development, Jonathan approached the podium alone. Eli Blake, my missing son, was found at St. Matthew, he said. And the corporation I lead was preparing to demolish this place. My signature appears in the records. It was misused, but I am not standing here to portray myself as a victim. I signed a summary without carefully reading the appendices. I ignored the community behind the numbers. The forgery does not erase my failure of oversight. Graham's attorney stood. Mr. Blake is changing a business decision because of a father's guilt. A flash drive with no verified evidence chain cannot justify suspending a project worth millions of dollars. That is correct, Lena answered when she was called to testify. That is why I am not relying on the flash drive. She presented data verified directly from the company servers. The records showed that Jonathan's digital certificate had been copied from a computer controlled by Graham. The approval email was sent at 2:13 in the morning while Jonathan was attending Ruth's memorial service. Keystone Renewal Partners had been registered through the law office of Graham's brother-in-law and would have provided Graham with a concealed benefit worth millions of dollars. Graham remained calm. Several people used administrative access. Nothing proves that I created the signature. Denise placed St. Matthew's operating license and overnight residence reports before the council. St. Matthew is a legally authorized youth support center. Children were sleeping tonight inside the room that the project records described as unoccupied. Marisol and Anna testified about the deleted donation log. That did not prove Graham's actions, but it revealed a familiar method. Remove vulnerable people from the records so the reports become more convenient. When it was Eli's turn, Denise asked whether he wanted to speak. Eli looked at Jonathan, then walked to the microphone by himself. He did not mention his family's wealth. He opened a list and read every name. Children who studied inside the art room, mothers staying temporarily after losing work, and teenagers who came for dinner so they would not have to sleep at the train station. If you remove their names from the documents, Eli said, they still exist. It only means no one accepts responsibility when they are forced onto the street. Graham was given the right to respond. He admitted pushing the project forward, but claimed it was necessary to protect profits and thousands of jobs. A leader sometimes has to make difficult decisions, Graham said. We cannot sacrifice an entire corporation for one old building. Lena opened the final email recovered from the server. Graham's instruction appeared on the large screen. Remove the resident list from the appendix. If no names appear on paper, no one will need relocation. The hearing officer suspended the demolition permit and ordered the construction vehicles to leave St. Matthew. The evidence involving forgery, fraud, and undisclosed conflicts was transferred to the proper authorities. Graham left with his attorney to face a transparent legal process now that his authority could no longer conceal the truth. That morning, the corporate board removed Graham and locked his access after the audit findings were confirmed. New controls over digital signatures, an independent reporting channel, and formal oversight of Jonathan were also approved. Jonathan canceled the development agreement and transferred ownership of St. Matthew into an independent community trust. The Blake name was not placed on it. The trust board included center representatives, parents, youth specialists, neighborhood residents, and one seat for a young person. The corporation would provide funding but could not close the center or change the property's purpose. Anna required every contribution to be publicly reported. She did not ask for a position and refused to let the press describe her as a woman rescued by a millionaire. At Liberty Crown, the cloud records and security footage cleared Anna of wrongdoing. She received all wages she had lost. Victor was removed for deleting records and retaliating against an employee, while Marisol took responsibility for a transparent food donation program. Through a scholarship managed by the Community Trust, Anna completed training as a youth program coordinator. St. Matthew hired her because of her experience and qualifications, not because Jonathan felt sorry for her. Jonathan continued leading the corporation under the new oversight system. He invited Eli home without giving an order. They began family therapy, shared one dinner each week without phones, and allowed Eli to continue volunteering. Eli returned under a safety plan, but did not promise immediate forgiveness. Several months later, Jonathan was washing pots beside the volunteers in the basement kitchen. There were no reporters and no speeches. Soapy water soaked his sleeves, but he did not ask anyone else to finish the work. Eli entered and placed his old backpack on a chair. "Dad, are you free?" Jonathan turned around. It was the first time since returning home that Eli had called him Dad instead of Mr. Blake. They stood together outside Ruth's old art room. The walls were still peeling, and her box of paintbrushes remained on the shelf. Eli asked, "Are you staying this time because you feel guilty, or because you truly want to know me?" Jonathan did not search for a perfect answer. "I do not yet know how to become the father you need, but if you allow me, I will stay long enough to learn." Eli handed him a paintbrush. "Then begin with this wall." Anna placed the identification badge she had once dropped on the memorial board beside the words, "One small act can guide someone home." She called the children downstairs for dinner as Jonathan and Eli entered Ruth's room. Jonathan had found his son inside a basement in the middle of the city. But only after surrendering control, accepting responsibility, and remaining patient did he begin to recover Eli's trust. Because finding a missing child does not mean that child has been saved. Children truly return only when their voices are heard.